We are into the post-lunch session, and we continue the debate on the Queen Elizabeth Hospital bill. And at this time, I recognize Senator Tony Moore.
Thank you, Deputy President. The bill before this honorable chamber is intended to amend the Queen Elizabeth Hospital Act Cap 54 to establish the post of Executive Chairman, Chief Operations Officer, Executive Director of Clinical and Diagnostic Services, and to provide for related matters. This bill therefore seeks to examine and institute changes at the management level of the hospital. I think as we've been hearing so far throughout the debate, there's overwhelming evidence to support the view that governance plays an important role in the performance of healthcare systems. In fact, there are numerous studies that would support this, in that there are numerous studies which suggest that if a healthcare system is not governed well, we will unlikely see the returns from public health spending. While in Barbados we don't have the data, in this 166 square miles, we have several accounts that leave many of us observing that the poor people in our society, which would be the majority of us, even elect to pay significant amounts of our disposable income to access private health care. And this is a sad commentary for us, Deputy President, because so much money is invested into health care. And even recently we had another levy which directs money towards public health spending. So the question before us is, what is the connection between the amendments before us and everything that we have heard about the conditions at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, and particularly as it relates to the delivery of health care in Barbados? A 2006 Center for Global Development study pointed out that a country's health system is the institution that must be engaged and on the front line if governance is to improve government's effectiveness and control corruption in the health sector. When I saw that statement by the study, I wondered therefore if these changes at the level of management were some attempt to improve governance and support government's effectiveness in controlling corruption. But of course, as I said before, the data does not support evidence of corruption. Barbados will be unable to positively address health care or deficiencies in health care, which mainly relate to the functioning of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, if we continue to deny the institutional factors that affect its performance. And the first concern I observed with the changes before us is that the changes proposed at the management level don't dig deeper to speak towards institutional strengthening. It doesn't address the issues of financing. It doesn't speak directly to the accountability that would be required. Yet, one is left to presume that the changes are changes not only intended to bring better management, but better accountability. There are too many instances like the one that I had to hear recently around World Day for Decent Work, a day that's observed on October the 7th each year, where our accident and emergency unit had 24 patients waiting to be seen. Well, there were 21 admission patients from the short stay unit, and these were being held in situations where we had no beds. But not only a shortage of beds, but shortage of nurses in that situation, because there were no nurses to work in the short stay unit. On the night shift, in the A&E, only 2 registered nurses and 2 nursing assistants. 1 staff nurse who started at 1 o'clock, started a shift at 1 o'clock and had to work through till morning the next day to support the staffing needs that were still very inadequate. Too many recent reports of patients being tended in corridors, sometimes even on floors of the A&E, because of insufficient beds. And that's only the A&E. That's only the accident and emergency that we've heard earlier that we spent so much money to modify, to improve. Patients needing a catheter and family members on a public holiday driving all over from private pharmacy to private pharmacy to get one. You know what's the funny thing about it? Because I was a part of that experience where we eventually got one. Where you think? The private hospital, Bayview. Mr. President, Deputy President, the proposed changes in themselves, what I'm trying to say is that the proposed changes at the level of management in themselves will not bring about accountability unless there is an intention, and a clearly stated intention, not an implied intention. Bajans need confidence. A clearly stated intention that our hospital will be run in a far more business-like fashion. And I don't say business-like intending that people gotta go now and pay for health care. Don't do that to Senator Moore, nor the media in their song bites might pick that up. Senator Moore says that people need to start paying for health care. That's not what I'm suggesting. But we need for our hospital to be run in a more business-like manner. We need to correct the abuses related to lack of drugs. Unfortunately, I was in a situation in the A&E, not me being in the situation, but supporting a family member again, and witnessing a patient in accident and emergency with chest complaints. More than likely, he was suffering some kind of heart impact, negative heart impact. What do you call it? Myocardial infarction? That's the term? Infarction? Whatever. So he had some sort of problem with the heart. And trying to get there, right? And a simple call to the nurse, ever so often, the one of 2 nurses who were on duty. Anything I can get to help, anything that can assist. And there's a patient in that situation waiting to be tended to for over 2 hours up to the point, waiting for someone to come back to him. And I happened to overhear 2 nurses saying, I would like to be able to get our man over there Panadol, but we ain't got none. Something as simple as a Panadol. So we can't wait to have these issues addressed, and one has to wonder if the changes that are being considered are at the management level are changes where it is contemplated that it could address some of these instances. It is not clear. We need effective targeted training and supervision at all levels. We need routine audits. We were hearing that statements have not been audited since 2011. Yet, this is a hospital where all aspects of fiduciary responsibility and transactions should be monitored very closely. We need improved records and improved record keeping to provide systematic data to decision makers, and perhaps And I keep saying perhaps because the proposed amendments are not saying enough in themselves. Perhaps the intention is that the changes to the management structure would bring decision makers closer to information that would allow them to make easy and ready decisions. QEH, like a number of other institutions, needs discipline and accountability. It goes without saying if we are to improve productivity, patient satisfaction, performance, all the things that we would like to see improve. Without attention to these non-medical issues, the care and the quality of care and so on, will not see the kind of benefits that we would like to see within the time frame that many of us anticipate. And then the question of accountability for public revenues at a time where our country could least afford corruption, poor spending, and the like. Mr. Deputy President, I won't deny that I have had tremendous reservation with the discussion around the appointment of an executive chairman. An executive chairman, where we have observed it in the public sector, has not been a positive experience. In fact, it is one that has been an experience that we can say has to a very large extent watered down the potential advantages that such a function may bring to accountability. Our recent history marks a watershed in the history of a public utility. It tells a tale of decline, corruption, stealing, bad governance, bad decisions, which has left a utility reeling, where workers now have had to pay the price. Workers within that utility, and workers and their family now more generally have had to be suffering tremendous hardship on account of bad decisions, ridiculous contracts, and the like. Against this background, the arguments with respect to addressing corruption and bringing accountability in the way that I even imagine, as I said, is not clearly expressed and it has not come out significantly in the debate up to now. But the arguments of bringing accountability, when one looks at the history, the recent history of executive chairpersons in the public sector, leaves one to wonder whether this move will be in fact correcting anything. An executive chairman must not abuse his or her powers by being a tool of political manipulation, even when we're speaking about the public sector. Our health care cannot be further rationed as we are doing with water. So when we hear that an executive chairperson is going to be appointed by the cabinet, but that executive chairperson that is appointed by the cabinet is an employee of the QEH, it leaves those of us, even those of us with as few years as I've had in industrial relations, wondering where's the transparency and how is that going to impact when one is potentially governing oneself. And then from my perspective, wearing another hat, I wonder what implications it has for industrial relations interactions. The executive chairman, under the provisions that have been outlined, can potentially be a person that ends up being a power unto only himself, herself, and the cabinet of Barbados. That person may be appointed to the board, but shall be the chairperson of the board. It leaves a lot to question, and while I think, and while I would like to be confident that part of the attempt is to address accountability, it raises too many issues around transparency. And when issues are raised around transparency, questions of trust and intent therefore come into the fore. And that should not be amended to address current day players. Because when changes are made to address A and B today, how can we be sure that even where there is doubt and things work out for person A and person B, that when person C and person D comes tomorrow, that it will have the same effect? And if presuming that the issue that has been directing the changes are issues relating to accountability and preventing against corruption, based on what we have seen in the past, how can we assure that these changes that seem tailor-made and may be suited for now won't end up bringing us to a place where all of us know how it feels to be uncomfortable in? On that note, Deputy President, a question that comes to my mind and would come to the mind of a number of people would be, what liability would be imposed on us as citizens when a party changes? Because if a person is appointed by a cabinet and government changes hands, it means that cabinet, the next cabinet, is responsible for appointing a person. And what provision? I am not an attorney at law, not so well schooled, but the attorneys among us may have to answer the question, what then happens when government changes? Is this position tied to a term of government to ensure that the taxpayers of Barbados, who have already suffered and who this government recognized suffered as a result of a number of untimely contracts and improper contracts, is there provision being made to ensure that taxpayers don't have to carry a burden when government changes? Deputy President, I recognize that the position of executive chairman, based on my research on how similar positions may function, that has potential for addressing more directly all of the issues of accountability and governance and financial sustainability that we may have identified previously. It has that potential. It has that potential. Truthfully, where I've researched it, I've seen it prevalent in private health institutions and not in public. But even in a public health institution, I believe that it has the potential for addressing accountability and so on once the players intend for it to do so. With the recent departure of the CEO at the QEH and other senior management staff, the government may very well be making a conscious decision to address the management at the QEH in a manner that would result in unification of duties of the CEO and the chairman levels to bring accountability. But if you've recognized from my arguments up to now, I'm suggesting it may happen, but not necessarily shall happen as a consequence of the changes, is if the players involved intend for it to be so. Otherwise, it can yield to more corruption if there was corruption, and less accountability where there's already poor accountability. Deputy President, my sincere hope is that to enhance the board's ability to exert stronger and more efficient monitoring and governance, and to facilitate greater engagement, that the changes that are being debated today, if passed, that they will lead also to stronger central leadership and increased efficiency. I would like to think that it would improve the board's capacity to identify and address readily where problems occur. I would like to think that it would increase information flow going to the board to deliver better decision making. I would like to think that it would improve board confidence and awareness that the strategic mandate of the board itself is being pursued. But more importantly, I would like to see that all citizens of Barbados who depend on the QEH for healthcare would be the direct beneficiaries of a more efficiently run system. All citizens of Barbados, not just those who go for patient care, but the citizens of Barbados and those who reside in Barbados and who work at the QEH, who are already burdened by some fairly laborious working conditions. There's a need to remedy the ills of employment, therefore, at the QEH. Efforts have commenced and need to be bolstered. I can't deny that efforts have commenced because we're in a different hat where I represent only a small section, Senator Franklin, at the QEH. An engineering department where for years they have been complaining that where there are positions directly next to the incinerator, that they need to be moved. And for the first time we've received in too many years, and not only 10 years, more than 10 years, Senator Walcott, more than 12 years, more than 15, into your time. And for the first time, the workers in the engineering department have received positive word that their concerns are heard, recognition that their concerns are valid and that their concerns will be acted on. I don't believe that the commitment given is taken as comfort by those workers, but I do understand from them that the commitment which has been made has taken them a step closer towards justice than they have experienced for a long time before now. I would not purport, therefore, to say that is on the account of any single effort, but if it is, for that reason, the BWU may not want to enter debate on who should or should not assume a position, because then it may be a bit biased. The people of Barbados deserve excellent service. The workers of the QEH deserve excellent conditions. I've raised a number of questions, Deputy President, only because I'm not a framer of the law, and therefore the considerations that I present are considerations that I would hope that those who have that kind of responsibility would be able to reflect a bit more, reflect to respond to concerns of transparency. If something looks bad in the minds of people, it is bad no matter how good it is. And maybe the time might be now, before we proceed any further, to step back and see how we may do better to correct some of the issues of transparency. Because if transparency issues go unanswered in anybody's mind, then you can't expect people to believe that there will be accountability and there will be absence of corruption and there will be improvements. Mr. President, Deputy President, that is my submission. If the changes that are being presented contemplate a number of the objectives that I have outlined, I would like to urge that we not simply concentrate on acting quickly, but acting properly so that what is intended to be good can in fact be as good as we have intended it. I thank you.
Thank you, Senator Moore. I next recognize Senator Rudy Grant.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today I am happy to be able to contribute to this debate and support the bill that is before this chamber. Of course, the bill makes reference to amending the Queen Elizabeth Hospital Act to establish the posts of Executive Chairman, Chief Operations Officer, and Executive Director of Clinical and Diagnostic Services. Mr. President, Mr. Deputy President, I believe that based on the comments that have already been made and following on what Senator Moore would have said, that there is certainly continuing concern for the manner in which the Queen Elizabeth Hospital functions. And let me say, sir, that I do not believe a debate on the QEH should be a political debate or should be a partisan debate. The reality is that we are talking about an institution that is extremely important to Barbadians, to residents, to visitors. And therefore, we have to ensure that through our contributions that we seek to make this institution one that is fit for the purpose of delivering significant health care, and that we are able to optimize health through preventative care that is being undertaken as well. My understanding, Mr. President, and I have to confess to this chamber that I am not a specialist in health. I heard Senator Franklin this morning, and he spoke. I, sir, was waiting to hear him say that he is a medical doctor, or that he was a nurse, you know, because the manner in which he spoke, but having constantly and consistently to be educated about certain medical matters by the leader of government business. I am not a medical person, but I see the Queen Elizabeth Hospital really as part of the overall delivery of healthcare. And in that institution where a number of different players operate. I reference how a car, for example, functions. You go into your car and you turn the engine, you put in the key, or you press, these days they're keyless vehicles, or you press the button and the vehicle starts. But the reality is that there are a lot of constituent elements to that. And I believe that the desire of the government is to seek to ensure that through the amendment to this bill, that we provide for better administration at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, that we are able to ensure that the monies allocated for the QEH, the leader of government business indicated that some $129 million is provided in the estimates for the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And I would think that the changes that we're talking about, those changes are designed to seek to ensure that that money is used in the proper way, that it is used in an effective and an efficient manner to provide these services, to ensure that there's supplies. You know, we all hear of the stories. I have not, sir, experienced them myself, but I hear of stories of people having to take toilet paper. I hear of stories of people having to take soap, of people having to take all different types of things in order to ensure that the service is provided for patients. And some reference was made to that today in this debate. So there is no doubt there needs to be transformational change, and that there needs to be change management at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And I am of the view that what is being presented in terms of the amendment to this bill could possibly facilitate that, and that certainly the government is of the opinion that that can be facilitated. I heard comments made, sir, about the utilization of an executive chairman, and my only response to that, I did a little research. I reviewed a research paper done by Stanford University Graduate School of Business. I know that Senator Maynard is very familiar with it. It relates, yes, to the private sector. It relates to 200 Fortress 1000 companies in Barbados, in the USA. Sorry, it came out of that list. 100 of the largest, 100 of the smallest. And my only reference date is this. And yes, it is for private sector oriented companies. Yes, it is in relation to having shareholders. No question with respect to that. But at the end of it, and I read it, you know, what was very interesting, it was done over a 20-year period from 1996 to 2015. And what was interesting is that you had situations when, in some companies over that 20-year period, you had a separation of chairman and CEO. And then in the same companies, they were brought back together, chairman and CEO. The point that I'm making, sir, is that very often the administration of entities, whether private or public, that it changes. And it changes really, sir, to be relevant for the particular time in which it is being undertaken. So it does not mean, sir, that if 20 years ago a particular position may have been taken, that position has to be necessarily the same position to be taken today, because the circumstances and the environment, sir, may have changed. So that is all that I would say, sir, with respect to that. The paper, like I said, was produced by the Stanford University Graduate School of Business. It was produced in June of 2016. The title was Chairman and CEO, the Controversy Over Board Leadership. So I do believe that the government is of the opinion that with this new structure, we can see a better functioning Queen Elizabeth Hospital. So we all know that the hospital is there for the provision of healthcare, and as I indicated before, that is only one element. They engage in prevention. I guess the specialists will talk about engagement in prevention and diagnosis and in treatment as well. There are a number of professionals operating. The point that I'm making is that while we speak of the QEH today, we have to recognize that the executive chairman is going to be working with different individuals to make sure that they pull everything together, whether you're talking medicine, whether you're talking dentistry, whether you're talking psychology, whether you're talking physical therapy, whether you're talking whatever element of it is, whether you're talking nursing. The point that I'm making, sir, is that there are a number of elements that come in to ensuring that we provide good care and that we are optimizing health care. And I think it is also critical and important that we look at preventative care measures as well and living healthy. We know, Mr. President, that sometimes when you talk about eating healthy, that is not always an easy thing in terms of the cost of having those items that allow you to eat healthy. But you know, Mr. Deputy President, during lunch we were talking. We were talking, for example, about the different fruits that you have in Barbados. The leader of government business was indicating, for example, that soursop is good. Bajan cherries, the different things. And the only point that I am making here, sir, is that as we speak of healthcare, we also have to speak to the fact that we need to engage in healthy living, and we need by that to assist as well in terms of what would eventually be the overall cost with respect to the provision of healthcare. The other element, sir, that I would like to touch on with respect to living healthy, you know, and I may have said it in this chamber before. There was a time when, you know, we had the chickens that we had in the backyard, the yard fowls, man. So, Mr. Deputy President, I have to tell you, Mr. Deputy, well, I'll come to that just now. Thanks for the opening, Senator Franklin. Thanks for the opening. I was wondering how I would get there. There was a time we had the yard fowl chickens. Mr. Deputy President, the sweetest chicken that you can get, Baba. Yard fowl, I know. We had the yard fowl chicken. Today though. You know, sir, what was happening at that time was that a lot of Barbadians would have been growing more food. A lot of Barbadians would have been ensuring that they had a little kitchen garden as well, and they would be utilizing the yard fowl. But you know what's happened, sir? Yes, it is. The truth is, there's a new role that is being undertaken, and we see there are a number of stray chickens now in Barbados. Right? I went by my mom a few weeks ago, and I saw some chicks, and I was very concerned because I saw the dog kind of looking at them, and I thought this dog might kill these chicks. And a man passed through the area, and he tell me, listen, I collect chicks, I walk around, man. I collect these chicks. The point there though is that we do have in Barbados a lot more what could best now be referred to as wild chickens, and you know, they are creating some challenges for us in relation to the garbage situation in Barbados. I know that you would not want me to speak to this issue of healthcare without making some reference to what is happening, because you know, the truth is this. As I said, the Queen Elizabeth is one element, but you do have as well to speak to the issue of other elements that impact on healthcare. So again, with your permission, Mr. Deputy President, I'm going to speak a little bit about what impacts healthcare and in terms of collection of refuge as well. I want to say though, sir, that there have been quite a number of comments made by the Barbadian public in relation to the collection of garbage, comments made in relation to how non-collection could be a public health issue. I want this chamber to know, and I want the Barbadian public to know, that we have heard them, we have listened to them. I take very seriously how Barbadians feel and how Barbadians relate. And I want, sir, to acknowledge those concerns, those legitimate concerns that come from the public of Barbados. And I want the public of Barbados to know, sir, that we are listening. And while it is going to be challenging for us to provide that service without the appropriate number of trucks, I have to tell this chamber the measures that will be undertaken in order to seek to improve the collection of garbage. Mr. Deputy President, As I would have said in this chamber before, there are 12 new garbage trucks on order. The expectation, and it relates to health. So I have the latitude to speak to health-related issues.
A point of order, sir. Sir, I'm lost. This has relevance to the debate that we're dealing with now, sir.
Yes, he has made a connection.
And that connection is so tenuous,
Because
sir.
if you get sick because of the garbage, you'll end up in the QA.
Mr. President, I thought that connection was very clear. There is a very clear connection, and I sought to make that connection before I got into this aspect of it, and Senator Franklin himself made reference to these chickens and garbage. The 12 new trucks, sir, the chassis for those trucks were constructed in Japan. Those chassis are now in Iowa. At the plant, New Way. The bodies for all 12 garbage trucks have been completed. The 2 have already been fitted onto the chassis. The engineer from Simpson Motors will be leaving on the 28th to go to Iowa. The trucks as completed, the trucks as they come off the production line will then be taken to Jacksonville, and from Jacksonville they will be shipped to Barbados. And as the trucks are produced, as the trucks are manufactured and completed, we will bring them to Barbados. I also want to tell you, sir, that when I spoke in this chamber before, I did indicate that these are purpose-built trucks, and it takes 7 to 9 months. But the truth is, the public outcry has been significant. And on Tuesday next week, the board of the Sanitation Service Authority will consider the purchase of other trucks by shorter means. It means, sir, that every single aspect in relation to a new truck might not be fulfilled. But we have to get trucks here in a timely manner to ensure that we are able to deal with the concerns of the public of Barbados and to ensure that there are no public health issues, and we will get that done. Mr. Deputy President, we are in the process, and I believe certainly by the end of this week, an additional 20 skips will be placed around Barbados. We will be utilizing the services of the private waste haulers to assist us with the movement of those skips. But in addition to that, the SSA's board will also consider next week, Tuesday, the purchase of an additional 12 skips as well. The point that I'm making is this, that we are not just sitting idly by. And I said, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital is one aspect of healthcare, but there are other elements that are important as well to ensure that we have no public health issues. And I want to assure this chairman, I want to ensure the public of Barbados that at the SSA we are taking measures to deal with the challenges which we have. You would have heard, sir, as well, that we will be facilitating the hiring of job hands. As we look to bring more equipment and have more trucks, we have to make sure that constantly we are able to have the necessary crew to facilitate that. And so we will be having, sir, the hiring of job hands. So I want the Barbadian public to be assured that we will properly utilize the systems that we have to improve the garbage collection and to ensure that there are no issues. And we pay, sir, specific attention to healthcare facilities. We do that on a consistent basis so that the Queen Elizabeth Hospital will have no challenges whatsoever in relation to the area of the collection of garbage. But sir, as we speak to health, I have as well to just briefly touch on another element that is important to me, and that is the element of health and wellness tourism. And I'm getting, I'm getting the sense, Mr. Deputy President, that some members are anticipating what I would say. There is the potential, sir, for the expansion of this very important niche area where persons are able to receive medical treatment and join that with a tourism program. There's also in the area of wellness the opportunity for persons who are in good health to come here and to engage in activities which will be able to maintain their physical and psychological health. So, and I believe, sir, that Barbados, as the type of product offering we have and the type of tourism destination which we are, even though we've had, sir, a period of 10 years where Barbados was taken backward, 10 years by the various ministers of health. I won't get into that right now about the various ministers of health. I will steer clear of that at this time. But the truth is that Barbados does have, I think, the constituent elements that are very important in being able to create a niche in terms of health and wellness. I would want, sir, to use this opportunity to encourage government to consider setting up a national marketing and product development committee. The reason why I say that is that I think that as we think of the challenges that exist in tourism, you know, while on a recent trip, sir, to Ireland and Scotland, which was led by Minister Simmons, we heard of the Thomas Cook collapse. And we were able to take immediate measures to seek to ensure that we facilitated the additional or the replacement airlift that will come to Barbados by Virgin. We lost 27,000 seats with Thomas Cook. We now have 30,000 seats with Virgin, and those 30,000 seats are direct seats. We know of the challenges that exist with Brexit, the uncertainty surrounding Brexit. And we would have heard recently of the buyout by Marriott, the proposed buyout of Marriott of the Elegant Hotels. The point, sir, that I want to make is that we have to ensure that all of the tourism players in the development of an important niche of health and wellness, that all of us are working from the same page and determining of how we would collaborate in order to bring more visitors to Barbados. So I'm encouraging government to consider that. The entities to be involved, the Ministry of Tourism, the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc., the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association, the Intimate Hotels of Barbados Tourism Development Corporation, and those elements, sir, that I said that would be very important. Mr. Deputy President, I could not close in the time that I have remaining without making some reference to comments by Senator Franklin. And you know, I think that it is rather unfortunate that Senator Franklin stands in this chamber and accuses the government of finding jobs for family, friends, and party individuals. And he's made, sir, just a broad statement, and he says that he knows who the executive chairman would be. I myself don't know, but that is not the issue. The issue is this. I believe, sir, that in a small country such as Barbados, challenged with resources, that it is important for us to properly utilize the resources that are available to us. Is Senator Franklin saying that a spouse of a minister should not have the right to contribute and to work in Barbados? If that individual, sir, has the skills, the competence, the knowledge, the experience.
Sir,
You're raising on a point of
explanation here. Challenge is a part of my speech and I want to clarify.
clarification.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sir, I never said that. I said it looks bad because you're not advertising this post and you're giving it to one of your friends and family, the minister's wife. I'm not saying that I never question the person's competence. I just talk about how it looks. It looks bad. It smells bad.
Mr. Deputy, Mr. Deputy President, in the comments made by Senator Franklin, he made no reference to competence. He made no reference to experience. He made no reference to value being added by an individual who is the spouse of a minister. He left, sir. He left, sir.
Senator Grant,
Yes.
did he make reference to qualifications?
Oh, sorry, Mr. Deputy President, I don't recall that either. No reference to qualifications. Absolutely not. And he
Point
left,
of
sir.
clarification, sir. I did not make any of those points. As I said, we will never know if the person is the best person for the job because it was not advertised. It is not going to be advertised. That is the problem. It is a job for BLP hacks. And I will challenge anybody to deny it. She has been in the Barbers Labour Party and she served the Barbers Labour Party well. This is her reward. I do well. Anything I do well.
Mr. President, Mr. Deputy President, Senator Franklin left for there to be the interpretation that the Barbados Labour Party government was simply looking to reward somebody who had been faithful to the party. But he made absolutely no reference to the competence of the individual. He made absolutely no reference to the value that the individual would bring. He made absolutely no reference to the qualification of the individual. And I'm saying to you, Mr. Deputy President, I'm saying to you, Mr. Deputy President, that in rebuilding this country and taking it from the 10 devastating years of a Democratic Labour Party government, we have to ensure that we properly utilize all of the skills and resources available to Barbados. And that in moving this country forward, we must not do so on the basis of partisan politics, but we must do it, sir, on embracing individuals. And I am glad, sir, to be associated with a political party in government that continues, sir, to practice the politics of inclusion. I'm obliged to you, sir.
I don't know how, in terms of, I don't know if everybody knows, but some of the senators, I should say, have to go to a function at 5 o'clock. It's 4:30. Anyhow, so we can do how many more? At least one. Yeah. Senator Drakes.
Mr. Deputy President, thank you for allowing me to make my contribution this afternoon. And first of all, I want to thank Senator Grant for his creativity. He truly injects a level of creativity that I have never seen before when it comes to debate sometimes. It somehow comes, yes, and passion. But I want to more so follow on from Senator Moore's contribution because she spoke about governance. And I want to speak this afternoon as it relates to these amendments to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital Act cap on good governance and why good governance is important. Good governance, Mr. Deputy President, is important because it is the way in which you ensure some level of integrity to institutions, positions, and even procedures by which decisions are made. And that minimum level of integrity is important even on the international stage, that the United Nations thought it fit to have it included in the key elements of attaining sustainable development in a country. Sustainable Development Goal number 16, Mr. Deputy President, seeks to promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. Sir, in the public sector, it is even more important that you have this characteristic of good governance within public institutions, because there has to be some level of accountability that comes along when you are the caretaker of taxpayers' money. Because sometimes we get confused, or the rhetoric goes that we seem to think that the money belongs to the current administration at the time, who is actually a caretaker of the taxpayers' money, and they're entrusted to carry out the mandate of the citizens of the country in a way that is transparent and accountable. I found a study. It wasn't the one Senator Grant referenced, sir, but I found a study by the International Federation of Accountants, and it is a 2014 report called The Principles of Good Governance in Public Institutions. And there's 7 key principles in the public sector and public institutions, and there's 7 key principles that they identified. And I'll highlight 4 of them, Mr. Deputy President. They state that you have to behave with integrity, demonstrating strong commitment to ethical values and respecting the rule of law. You have to ensure openness and inclusivity, and you have to be accountable to your stakeholders. And you have to manage risk and perform through robust internal controls and strong public financial management. And the 4th one that I'd like to highlight is to implement good practice in transparency reporting and audit to deliver effective accountability, sir. Simply put, you have to have transparency, you have to have accountability, and you also have to have a level of fairness in your operations. And so when you have those things presiding in an institution or a public institution, it also speaks to the maturity of your society, that they can look past their own self-interest to ensure that there's effective operations and efficient operations of taxpayers' money. But the argument goes even further for good governance in the public sector. Sir, good governance is also accompanied or is positively related to economic growth. There are empirical studies that have shown that countries that have established good governance attain a faster rate of economic growth, and not just that, they sustain it over a longer period of time. Those countries that have poor governance structures actually lag behind, and even when they attain economic growth, sir, it is not continuous and it is not sustained. And so that is found in Nordic countries such as Finland, Norway, and Denmark, who are known to be globally competitive. And they have strong institutions, and even more so, they have a high level of trust in public officials. Another example of this can actually be seen in Ghana. The World Bank is now predicting that Ghana will actually have approximately 9% growth by the end of the year. And in their prosperity pillar index, they ranked extremely high in social capital and in governance. So, Mr. President, as we try to work our way out of the economic problems that we found ourselves in, we have to ensure that transparency and accountability is the order of the day. And I want to say this because in the last election, that was one of the key things this current administration, from St. Lucie to Christchurch, they touted it at every instance they could because of the perceived mismanagement by the former administration, Mr. Deputy President. And we even saw that it was so important to the administration that they very quickly tabled the Integrity in Public Life Bill, which is still a bill. But for whatever reason, it still has not reached this chamber. Sir, it is also important that good governance, although it may seem abstract, is governed in a way at the macro level of your affairs and also at the micro level. You should have good governance principles, Mr. President, Mr. Deputy President, when you're awarding contracts, when you are hiring persons, when you are dismissing persons. There should be some level of accountability in that structure. And sir, it must be done in a way that the structure, the decision making, refutes self-interest and it negates conflicts of interest. And one of the things I want to say as well is that because the Barbadian public has been at the mercy of what was considered extremely poor management of its affairs within the last administration, I want to warn this government. Anything that you do that can be perceived, Mr. Deputy President, as having any untoward intent. It may even vaguely look like corruption. It may vaguely look like favoritism. It may vaguely look like nepotism. It will be at their own detriment. Because you have a situation, and let's get real serious, Mr. Deputy President, you have a situation in this country where you have persons who say they will never vote again for anybody that runs in politics because they're fed up of the same things being touted by either side, but yet you come when you are in power and rewrite the same story. But I want to get to the amendments, Mr. Deputy President, because I don't want to get into the personification of these amendments. In the other place, that is what I deem to have happened. And we saw an exchange just now that we are personifying these amendments. And that is something I think we shouldn't do. Look at the amendments for what they are and the implications that they will have. So right now we have amendments that more or less, it isn't explicitly stated, you're removing the role of the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer of the QEH, and you're introducing a Chief Operations Officer, a COO. You're also introducing the Executive Chairman position. Sir, and that person is appointed by the minister based on cabinet approval. And sir, that person will also be, according to these amendments, a staff member of the QEH. On top of that, the executive chairman can only be dismissed from the post based on the approval of the minister. And I want to ask the question, is that commonplace hiring practice of a staff member of a statutory corporation through appointment? Sir, government has said that we need to make these amendments, and don't get me wrong, I will not stand here and say that the QH does not have its problems, and we need to move in a manner that addresses them. My mother was a patient there when I was at the age of 7 and I believe 11. And I thank God that she made it out alive. There are many issues at the hospital. I'm sure Senator Maynard and Senator Haynes will address those. But nonetheless, I am not satisfied, sir, that we're doing this the right way. the justification, sir, of seamless execution of affairs and to fix the number of issues at the QEH. That is a justification that is being placed or tabled for these amendments. To strengthen the management at the QEH. But sir, when we go back to good governance and going back to those pillars, those key principles, we now have an executive chairman that, according to clause 9A2, that is selected by the minister based on cabinet approval. And I'm asking the question, is that process transparent and is it fair based on good governance principles? We're removing the role of the CEO, which was a staff member who was appointed by the board. That I can understand because that is a separation of power within the governance structure. There's a certain level of checks and balances that occur to ensure there's no abuse of power. I understand that, Mr. Deputy President. Sir, even more, we now have an executive chair that, according to the first schedule, the minister may appoint that person as a member of the board. And then later on in the clause, it says the minister shall appoint the executive chairman as the chairman of the board. So which one is it? And if it is that the minister shall appoint the executive chair as the chairman of the board, to my recollection, the CEO, which I believe this person is taking on some of their responsibilities along with the COO, the CEO used to, or in practice, reports to the chair of the board. So how is it that we have an executive chair that is now reporting to the chairman of the board when the two persons seem to be the same person, according to these amendments? It reports to the board, but there is a chairman of the board. So, sir, I asked the question, when you make that type of governance arrangement, are you creating greater accountability? Are you creating greater transparency? Or are you facilitating a post that facilitates conflict of interest, or even worse, self-interest? And this is forgetting the argument of person. This is about posts. I just want to know, Deputy President, if these amendments hold up to scrutiny. The scrutiny of good governance. And then, if you have an executive chair that is also the chairman of the board, I also have questions on if there, for instance, a case where there are deviations between the board, the senior management, where does the executive chair lie? How do they reconcile these differences, and in whose interest do they act? Or even worse, do they just report to the minister? Because that is how the person is being hired. Then you have an instance, if the board sees the executive chair, who is also the chairman of the board, as being inept or ineffective, what mechanism do they have to hold the person accountable? Because the leader of government business stood today to say that the board was created to remove the bureaucracy of the ministry from the QEH by establishing the board. So what I see in these amendments, sir, is a separation, the removal of the separation of power and the checks and balances that should occur in an institution like the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And as I said, I have no issue with saying we need to expedite things that happen at the hospital. But I genuinely do not see how this framework, this current existing framework, does not beg to question government's intent. Sir, this legislation muddies the waters. It truly does. Anyone who looks at it will see that it muddies the waters. And if you're saying that you're solving an issue of poor management, what I am seeing, and this is not to cast aspirations on a person, but what you are facilitating by default, sir, is an abuse of power. And that's just a fact. And we're hearing that this happens in other organizations, and yes, it's mostly private. Because the CEO is usually the founder, the owner of the company, so they chair the board who is responsible to the shareholder, which is the CEO in some instances if they have the largest amount of shares. But sir, there has to be a greater scrutiny and greater application of good governance when we're talking about public institutions. As rightly said, the QEH is expected to have it was allocated $129 million of $227 million allocated to the Ministry of Health. So that's almost half, a little over half of the ministry's budget. And I am really not satisfied with any of the arguments that I've heard in the other place or in this chamber for these amendments. You have a post of a CEO, you have a post of a chairman, fix the relationship between the two, and you still have your governance structure intact. But to bring legislation that erodes the principles of good governance, I think it's possibly a step in the wrong direction. And sir, let us, as I said, not forget that you're dealing with a public that is absolutely fed up. Sir, I also heard in the other place that this type of arrangement, and this is my problem with the justification, in the other place that this type of arrangement is also done at the central bank. The way in which the central bank is governed and is run is completely different from a public institution. There's a certain level of autonomy that comes along with the operations at the central bank. So to make the two in comparison, I think was a bit disingenuous. So for me, I am not, as I said, convinced about these amendments. And I'm not the type that will sit here and complain unnecessarily or attack the government in their doings or trying to hinder their operations. But I genuinely am not satisfied, one, with the amendments, and two, with the justification that's going along with the amendment. And sir, I did some research trying to find out what type of structure presides over well-run public hospitals. And in the time that I had, I actually found 3 that I could find the governance arrangements. That was in the Singapore General Hospital, the Royal Melbourne Hospital, and Toronto General Hospital. Toronto General Hospital is a non-profit, more or less. And so they all have a different CEO and a different chairman. So the other question I have is, where has the government seen this model? Not saying that it has to, but I'm asking, as a best practice, as a best practice for running the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. I heard Senator Moore say that we actually have a poor track record of this type of position. And although we stand and we talk about all of the various issues that happen at the QEH, given the track record of the executive chair, we still think that implementing this is a good idea. Why? The main argument, personification. Who the person may be to fill the post. And that is nothing against who may fill the post. But I take issue as a taxpayer with this type of arrangement. There was something said in the other place as well. I believe it was the Honourable Prime Minister who said, the executive chair now, because of the amalgamation of responsibility, to whom much is given, much is expected. More or less, that is what was said. But so I have another version to that. I have another side to that coin. Power tends to corrupt. And absolute power corrupts absolutely. What we have here, sir, is amendments where we have an executive chair who is essentially reporting to themselves, and only a minister can appoint or dismiss based on approval that individual who is not a staff member at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital after these amendments will be passed, if they're passed. So, sir, those are my contributions. There's some other things I would have brought up, but I don't think the government has time to address some of these transparency and accountability issues. But, I was so taught my talk. Sir, good. With your leeway, sir, with your permission. Recently, and sir, good governance and transparency and accountability at all levels. One decision in amendments on very serious, larger macro matters, such as the external debt. Sir, I'm more or less satisfied with the information that was published on October 18th about the external credit negotiations. What that does is it does create some space for the government and planning its finances, and it gives us some fiscal space to operate. The things that were clear coming out from that negotiations were, one, the creditors took a haircut of 26% on principal and interest, and by and large, what we now have would be new bonds floating that will be repaid starting in 2025 and maturing in 2029 at a fixed interest rate of 6.5%. And these are the things that were clear coming out of the negotiations. Sir, but in order to renegotiate the debt, we had to give way in the short term something. We have to give up something. They've asked us to pay US $7.5 million in non-reimbursable fees, and they've asked us to start to repay some of the interest payments that are owed in the short term of up to $32.5 million, with the first payment in October 2020 and the balance in another 4 months after that in February 2021. But sir, I need clarity on two things. If the government is going to be transparent and it's going to be accountable and it's going to be clear in all of its messaging to the public of Barbados. And I understand that the finer details cannot be released as yet, but based on what was released, sir, I need some clarity to go into the public. There's a clause, sir, that presides over the negotiations that is a bit uneasy for those of us who pay attention to these things. Sir, the clause states that it is a clause providing for the reinstatement of forgiven principal and past due and accrued interest upon the occurrence of a payment event of default prior to the successful completion of the ongoing IMF fund program. Sir, I think that in government's messaging to the people of Barbados, they need to clarify very quickly what payments they're talking about in this clause and to whom. Because when I read it, I had a very different interpretation to what I saw in the papers. Sir, I read that clause to mean that the two payments that are now due within the IMF program, we cannot default on them. If not, the deal is off. Somehow I saw in the paper that if any payments made based on the IMF program are defaulted on, the deal is off. So when you leave these things left up to interpretation, you get a lot of confusion and misinformation being spread in the public domain. And right now I'm actually doing the government a favor by highlighting that they actually need to explain this clause as explicitly as possible. And the other thing I want to be explicit in government's reporting, transparency and accountability, and engaging your stakeholders, Mr. President. I asked for permission before I spoke. Good. Sir, it was said by the government's advisors that we're saving $1 billion over the life of the program. And yes, we now have breathing room between that 2021 payment and the 2025 payments. Yeah? As it relates to the external credit. But sir, I would like the government to place the currency of that $1 billion. Is that US $1 billion we saved, or is that Barbados $1 billion we saved? Because it's very important that you state these things when you're speaking. Sir, in renegotiating the debt.
Could you go over this point again for me, please?
Sir, government has said, one of its advisors has said to the public of Barbados that we saved $1 billion. What I am asking is that 1 billion US dollars, or is that 1 billion Barbados dollars? And I'm asking for that clarification because in renegotiating the debt, we acquired debt. If Barbados saved 1 billion Barbados dollars, approximately 500 million US dollars, you saved that on the backdrop of acquiring $465 million, sir, in debt from the IMF, $290 from the CDB, $75 million, and the IDB, $100 million.
It's a good question, but
It is a good question
just let me just.
Back the wrong
I-
debate.
No, but
Back the wrong debate.
could I ask a question? No. Just a minute. Please. To Senator Drakes. Isn't it a fact that when you say dollars in the debt, that automatically you mean Barbados dollars? And if you meant US dollars, you would always have it there as US dollars.
I understand your point, and I'm guided by you. But even in that interaction, sir, your clarification, some members over here stated something different from you, and that is my point. You have to be clear in speaking to the Barbadian public about what you are talking about in terms of savings. Because if you're talking about Barbados dollars, then you didn't save anything, you gained time. Because to save the $1 billion, you acquired almost another $1 billion of debt. So that is all I was asking, sir, in terms of clarification, and the government reporting to its stakeholders in terms of good governance and how they interact with the public, Mr. Deputy President. But sir, as I said, we need good governance. And I'm going to wrap up because you've given me a lot of leeway, and I don't usually ask for it, so I'm obliged to you. But
She wasn't talking about garbage trucks.
we have, sir, to have an environment of transparency and accountability at both the macro level and at the micro level. And sir, as I said, based on these amendments, I believe that it erodes the integrity of the governance of the structure of the QEH. And I will stand here and say that blatantly. I believe so. I do not know the information that the government has, and I'm sure a lot of the public does not know the information that the government has. And when they look at these amendments, they will also have the questions that I have as it relates to the checks and balances that will now have to happen or lack of at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Mr. Deputy President, I am obliged to you.
Mr. President, this brings us to the end of today's sitting, and I beg to move that this sitting be now adjourned sine die.
The question is that the sitting be adjourned sine die. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. The sitting is now adjourned sine die.